News America. It's the day after the 4th of July, but there are still fireworks coming out of the White House. A short time ago, the head of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, stepped down. His resignation follows a series of ethics scandals that have dogged his tenure. President Trump announced it in his usual fashion by tweet, saying, "I've accepted the resignation of Scott Pruitt as the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. Within the agency, Scott has done an outstanding job, and I will always be thankful to him for this." Well, Mr. Pruitt has been the subject of numerous stories which have called into question his conduct. And for more on this most recent shake-up, I'm joined now by Niall Stanage, Associate Editor at The Hill, and our North America Editor, John Sopel. Welcome to you both. Niall, starting with you, this has been going on for ages. Why now?
I think it's really the accumulation of scandals. This isn't a drip, drip, drip. There has been a deluge after deluge of damaging revelations about Scott Pruitt. I was speaking earlier this afternoon with someone who said they had spoken to the President a few days ago about this. They said that the final straw was a story about him trying to obtain a mattress from the Trump hotel at a cut rate. But this person also said, not surprised, long overdue. I think that's quite a widespread view.
But John, none of this was mentioned in his resignation letter.
No, the resignation letter is unapologetic. It talks about the kind of toll it had taken on his family and these vile accusations that had been levelled against him. And if you go through the charge sheet, it is quite something. Also, the resignation letter is in tone. Let me just give you a little flavour of it. "It is extremely difficult for me to cease serving you in this role because I count it as a blessing to be serving you in any capacity." And so it goes on in that kind of rather, if you're used to British politics, maybe a little bit stomach churning if you've just eaten a meal. But I mean, for Scott Pruitt, I mean, the list of allegations that would have kind of felled anyone else. I mean, forget draining the swamp. He was a one-man swamp.
Well, Niall, why then did the President give him so much support? Because the reaction has been very different to the other resignations and firings.
I think President Trump's support goes back to the point that John has made, what many people would see as the rather, frankly, sycophantic approach of Scott Pruitt. That approach tends to pay off with this president. Donald Trump is someone who values personal loyalty above almost anything else. He had certainly been pressured by other people within the White House. Scott Pruitt had no real allies, as far as I could discern, within the administration, except, for a while, the one ally who matters, which was the president.
And also, he was carrying out the agenda that Donald Trump wanted. I mean, let's talk about the policy on this. You know, he was a climate change doubter. He wanted to roll back some of the regulations that had prevented, oil companies from exploring. He was someone who was not the environmentalists' closest buddy. I would imagine if you're a Green campaigner, you'll be popping champagne corks tonight. But he was doing what Donald Trump wanted. He was following the agenda. He was, as Niall said, utterly sycophantic and loyal to Donald Trump. That makes you pretty safe in your job.
But will they be popping champagne corks? Will the agenda actually change with his replacement? What do we know about Andrew Wheeler?
I think they might be popping champagne corks now but suffering a hangover tomorrow because, as John says, I mean, this goes back to the President of the United States, who has a sceptical view of climate change, has a sceptical view of the traditional mission of the EPA, and has a view that businesses should not be overly regulated, which has traditionally been part of that mission. So the idea that Scott Pruitt's departure represents a sea change in terms of environmental policy, I don't think that's true at all.
All right, how difficult is it going to be to find a replacement?
Well, finding the replacement's the easy bit. Getting the replacement through a confirmation hearing, that's the really difficult bit. So, if Donald Trump wants to appoint another Scott Pruitt, who is going to kind of package himself in a very similar way to Scott Pruitt, I think that becomes immensely difficult. And you can't just appoint an EPA secretary. That has to go through the Senate, and that is where it is immensely complicated. It could be drawn out, could take months, and of course that starts running into midterm elections. And do you want a protracted battle where this becomes a sort of lightning conductor for some of your policies?
How do you think it's going to affect the midterms? Will it affect the midterms?
It could potentially energise environmentalists who have, obviously been very annoyed with the policies that the administration has pursued. But I think that there are so many issues with this administration all the time. Now, some people love what Donald Trump is doing, but it seems like a plurality of people hate it, and I don't think really the Democrats were going to have any great difficulty energising their base even without this.
John, we've talked about this time and time again. How does this constant turmoil affect the running of this administration?
this administration runs on constant turmoil. There is no other modus operandi. They've tried to have the discipline imposed by John Kelly when he was first appointed, and the kind of sense of structure and organisation. Look, you know, people keep saying to me, oh, eventually the wheels are going to come off. This can't go on like this. Yes, it can. Yes, it will. If Donald Trump didn't want drama and thunderclaps and noise, he would impose in place a set of systems that would stop that. He doesn't. It's part of how he likes to govern, and it's going to continue.
Niall, very briefly.
I agree. Is that brief enough?
I love it when people just say, I agree with John. That's great.
Happens all the time. John Sopel, Niall Stanage, thank you both very much for joining me on that breaking news.